The dust kicked up beneath Penelope Morrison's worn boots as she stumbled through the scorching August heat, her cheeks still burning from where her father's hand had struck her just an hour before. It was 1878, and the small mining town of Alta, Utah, had just witnessed the Morrison family publicly disown their only daughter in the center of town square. Her crime, nothing more than falling in love with Samuel Chen, the Chinese railroad worker who had stayed in town after the transcontinental line was completed nearly a decade ago. She carried nothing but a small cloth bundle with 2 dresses, her mother's silver locket that she had secretly grabbed, and the shame that came from her family's hatred burning hotter than the Utah sun beating down on her auburn hair. Her father's words still rang in her ears like church bells on Sunday morning. "You are no daughter of mine, Penelope Morrison. You have brought disgrace upon this family, consorting with that Chinaman. You will leave this house and never return. As far as this town is concerned, you are dead to us." Her mother had stood silent, tears streaming down her weathered face, but she said nothing in Penelope's defense. Her 2 younger brothers had looked away, unable to meet her eyes. The entire Morrison household had turned their backs on her because her heart had chosen differently than their prejudice would allow. Samuel had tried to stop them, had pleaded with her father to show mercy, but that had only made matters worse. The beating Samuel received from her father and his friends had left him bloodied and broken in the street. The marshal had done nothing, of course. Men like Samuel had no rights in towns like Alta, no matter how hard they worked or how honest they lived. Penelope had screamed and fought, but strong hands had held her back while they hurt the man she loved. When it was over, Samuel's uncle had appeared with a wagon and taken him away, back to the small Chinese community that lived on the outskirts of town. Samuel's uncle had looked at Penelope with something between pity and anger, and she understood. She had brought this violence to Samuel's door simply by loving him. Now she walked alone down the dusty road leading out of Alta, with no destination in mind and no plan for survival. She was 21 years old, educated enough to read and write, skilled with a needle and thread, and completely unprepared for the harsh reality of being a woman alone in the Utah territory. The mountains rose up around her, beautiful and indifferent to her suffering, their peaks still holding snow even in the summer heat. She had been walking for perhaps 2 hours when she heard the sound of hoofbeats behind her. Panic seized her heart. She thought perhaps her father had sent men after her to finish what he started, to make sure she truly left and never came back. She quickened her pace, but the horse was faster, and soon it was beside her. "Madam, you look like you could use some water." The voice was deep and gentle with a slight drawl that spoke of Texas or Oklahoma. Penelope looked up, shading her eyes against the sun, and saw a man astride a dusty brown mare. He was tall even sitting down, with broad shoulders and sun-bronzed skin. His hat was pushed back slightly, revealing dark hair and eyes that were a striking shade of green. He looked to be in his mid-20s, with a face that was handsome in a rugged way, marked by sun and wind and honest work. "I am fine, thank you," Penelope said, though her throat was parched and her lips were starting to crack from the dry mountain air. The man dismounted in one fluid motion, landing lightly on his feet despite his size. He pulled a canteen from his saddle and held it out to her. "Madam, I do not mean to be forward, but you are going to collapse from heat if you do not drink something. The sun up here in the mountains is no joke, even if the air feels cool." Penelope hesitated, then took the canteen. Her pride wanted her to refuse, but her body desperately needed water. She drank deeply, the lukewarm water tasting better than anything she could remember. When she handed it back, she met his eyes. "Thank you, Mr. Gideon Owens," he said, tipping his hat. "I work at the Riverside Ranch about 10 miles north of here. Was in Alta picking up supplies when I saw what happened in the town square." His expression grew serious. "That was a shameful thing your father did, madam. Truly shameful." Penelope felt her cheeks flush, but this time with humiliation rather than her father's violence. "You saw?" "Half the town saw," Gideon said quietly. "And most of them did nothing, which makes them just as guilty in my book. A man has a right to love who he chooses, and so does a woman. The color of skin should not matter one bit to anyone who calls themselves Christian, though I have found that Christians are often the worst offenders when it comes to treating people poorly." His words surprised her. In her experience, most white men in Alta held the same views as her father, believing that races should not mix, that Chinese and Irish and Mexicans should keep to their own kind. To hear this cowboy speak differently felt like finding water in the desert. "Where are you headed?" Gideon asked, his green eyes full of concern. "I do not know," Penelope admitted. "Anywhere but Alta." Gideon was quiet for a moment, then said, "The Riverside Ranch where I work is owned by a widow named Mrs. Eleanor Hartwell. She is always looking for help around the main house. Cooking, cleaning, mending. She pays fair wages and provides room and board. It is not much, but it is honest work and a safe place. I could take you there, if you want. Introduce you proper-like." Penelope studied him carefully. She had heard stories about men who preyed on desperate women, who made false promises and led them into terrible situations. But something in Gideon's face seemed genuinely kind, and she had few options available to her. She could continue walking until she collapsed, or she could trust this stranger who had shown her more kindness in 10 minutes than her own family had in the last terrible hour. "Why would you help me?" she asked. Gideon adjusted his hat, looking almost embarrassed. "My mother was Irish, came over during the potato famine. She married my father, who was half Cherokee. Neither of their families approved. They built a life together in Oklahoma, and they were happy until the fever took them both when I was 15. I have seen what prejudice does to good people, and I will not stand by and watch it happen without at least trying to help." He paused, then added, "Besides, Mrs. Hartwell believes in giving people chances. She gave me one when I showed up at her ranch 3 years ago with nothing but my horse and my saddle. Figure the least I can do is pass that kindness along." Penelope made her decision. "I would be grateful for the introduction, Mr. Owens. Please, call me Gideon." He smiled and his whole face changed, becoming younger and more open. "Can you ride?" "Yes, my father taught me when I was young. Before he decided I was only good for marrying off to a respectable white man," she thought bitterly. Gideon swung back up into his saddle, then reached down to help her up. Penelope hesitated only a moment before taking his hand. His grip was strong and calloused from years of ranch work, but his touch was gentle as he pulled her up behind him. She settled herself carefully, very aware that she was sitting pressed against a strange man's back, her arms around his waist to keep her balance. "Hold on tight," Gideon said. "We will take it easy, but there are some rough patches on the trail." As they rode north, away from Alta and everything Penelope had ever known, she felt the strangest sensation. Despite losing her family, despite the pain of seeing Samuel hurt because of her, despite having no idea what her future held, she felt something that might have been hope beginning to bloom in her chest, like a wildflower pushing through rocky soil. The landscape changed as they rode, the mountains giving way to rolling hills covered in sage and grassland. The sun was beginning its descent toward the western peaks when they finally arrived at Riverside Ranch. The property was beautiful, with a large 2-story house painted white, a big barn, several outbuildings, and pastures where cattle and horses grazed peacefully. A stream ran along the eastern edge of the property, giving the ranch its name, the water sparkling in the late afternoon light. Gideon helped Penelope down from the horse, and she swayed slightly on her feet. The long walk in the heat followed by the ride had left her exhausted and dizzy. Gideon steadied her with a hand on her elbow. "Easy there," he said. "Let me get you inside, and we will find Mrs. Hartwell." He led her up the porch steps to the main house and knocked on the door. After a moment, it opened to reveal a woman in her 50s with silver-streaked dark hair pulled back in a neat bun. She had sharp blue eyes that seemed to take in everything at once, and a face that was lined with years, but still handsome. She wore a simple but well-made dress and an apron dusted with flour. "Gideon," she said warmly, then her eyes shifted to Penelope, and her expression became concerned. "Who is this?" "Mrs. Hartwell. This is Miss Penelope Morrison. I met her on the road from Alta. Her family has turned her out, and she needs work and a place to stay. I thought you might be willing to give her a chance, same as you gave me." Mrs. Hartwell's sharp eyes moved over Penelope, taking in her dusty clothes, her bruised cheek, and the small bundle she carried. "Come inside, child," she said, stepping back to let them in. "Gideon, you can go tend to your horse. Miss Morrison and I need to talk." Gideon nodded and touched his hat brim before heading back toward the barn. Penelope watched him go, feeling suddenly nervous about being left alone with this stranger, even if she was a woman. "Mrs. Hartwell led her into a comfortable sitting room and gestured for her to sit on a cushioned chair. "I will get you some water and something to eat." You look about ready to fall over." She disappeared into what Penelope assumed was the kitchen and returned a few minutes later with a tray holding a pitcher of water, a glass, and a plate with bread, cheese, and sliced ham. Penelope's stomach growled at the sight of food. She had not eaten since breakfast, before her world had fallen apart. "Eat," Mrs. Hartwell said, settling into the chair across from her. "Then tell me what happened." Penelope ate slowly, trying to maintain some dignity, even though she wanted to devour everything on the plate. As she ate, she told Mrs. Hartwell everything. About falling in love with Samuel, about keeping it secret for months, about being discovered, about the beating and the disownment. Mrs. Hartwell listened without interrupting, her expression growing increasingly stern. When Penelope finished her story, Mrs. Hartwell was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Your father is a fool, and a cruel one at that. Love is a rare and precious thing in this hard world, and anyone who would punish someone for finding it is not worth the air they breathe." Penelope felt tears spring to her eyes at the validation. "You do not think I was wrong to love Samuel?" "I think you were brave," Mrs. Hartwell said firmly. "I think you followed your heart in a world that tries to tell women they do not have the right to their own hearts. My late husband was Mexican. Did you know that? My family disowned me when I married him, said I was ruining myself, throwing away my future. But I had 30 years of happiness with Roberto Hartwell before consumption took him 5 years ago. 30 years of love and partnership and building this ranch together. I would not trade a single day of it for my family's approval." "I am so sorry for your loss," Penelope said softly. "Thank you, dear. The grief gets easier, but it never fully goes away." Mrs. Hartwell straightened in her chair. "Now, as for your situation, I do need help around the house. My arthritis has been getting worse, and keeping up with cooking and cleaning and mending for a dozen ranch hands is more than I can manage alone. I can offer you $30 a month plus room and board. You will have your own room upstairs, small but private. Meals are provided. I expect hard work, honesty, and discretion. The men who work here are good men, but they are still men, and a young woman alone needs to be careful. Do we have an understanding?" "Yes, madam," Penelope said, relief flooding through her. "Thank you. Thank you so much. Do not thank me yet. You have not seen how much laundry a dozen cowboys can generate. But Mrs. Hartwell smiled as she said it. "Let me show you to your room. You can rest this evening and start work tomorrow. Sunday is a day of rest around here, so you will have time to settle in." The room Mrs. Hartwell showed her to was indeed small, but it had a real bed with a quilt, a washstand with a basin and pitcher, a small dresser, and a window that looked out over the pastures. To Penelope, who had expected to be sleeping under the stars, it looked like paradise. "There is water in the pitcher for washing," Mrs. Hartwell said. "Supper is at 6. Come down when you are ready." When she was alone, Penelope sat on the bed and let herself cry for the first time since leaving Alta. She cried for her family, for the love they had chosen to destroy, for Samuel and the pain he had endured. But mixed in with the grief was relief and gratitude, and a strange new feeling that she gradually recognized as freedom. Supper that evening was a lively affair. The ranch hands ate in a separate building called the bunkhouse, but Mrs. Hartwell insisted that Penelope join her and the foreman, a weathered man in his 60s named Jack Sullivan, in the main house dining room. Gideon was there too, and Penelope was surprised by how glad she was to see his familiar face. Over a meal of roast chicken, potatoes, and vegetables from Mrs. Hartwell's garden, Penelope learned more about Riverside Ranch. Mrs. Hartwell and her late husband had built it from nothing over 3 decades, and it was now one of the most successful ranches in the territory. They ran cattle and bred horses, selling to settlers, the army, and anyone else who needed quality livestock. "We treat our animals well and our people better," Mrs. Hartwell said. "Respect is the foundation of everything here. I do not tolerate cruelty, laziness, or dishonesty. Beyond that, what a man does with his free time and who he chooses to care about is his own business." After supper, Gideon offered to show Penelope around the property. Mrs. Hartwell nodded her approval, though she gave Gideon a meaningful look that said clearer than words, "Behave yourself." They walked through the warm evening air, the mountains turning purple in the twilight. Gideon showed her the barn where the horses were kept, the chicken coop, the root cellar, the smokehouse, and the garden. He introduced her to some of the ranch hands they passed, and Penelope was relieved that they all tipped their hats respectfully and made no crude comments. Mrs. Hartwell runs a tight ship, Gideon explained as they walked along the stream. She fired a man last year for making inappropriate remarks to one of the hands' wives who came to visit. Did not even give him a chance to apologize, just paid him what he was owed and sent him packing. Word got around. Everyone here knows to be respectful, or find work elsewhere. You really admire her, Penelope observed. I do. She is tough but fair, and she judges people by their character, not their circumstances. He paused, then said carefully, Can I ask you something personal? I suppose so. The man you loved, Samuel, do you still love him? Penelope's throat tightened. Yes. I do not think that will change just because my father forbade it, but I cannot go back to him. Being near me put him in danger. His community will be safer if I stay away. That is a hard sacrifice to make. Love requires sacrifice sometimes, Penelope said quietly. At least, that is what my mother used to tell me, back when she still spoke to me. They walked in silence for a while, listening to the burble of the stream and the distant lowing of cattle. Finally, Gideon said, I know we just met today, and you have no reason to trust me, but I want you to know that you are safe here. If you ever need anything, or if anyone bothers you, you can come to me. I will help however I can. Penelope looked at him in the fading light. His face was serious, his green eyes earnest. Why are you being so kind to me? Because kindness is free, and the world has too little of it. He smiled slightly. And because I know what it is like to feel alone. Something in his words resonated deep in Penelope's chest. She realized that despite everything she had lost today, she had also found something unexpected, genuine human compassion from strangers who had no obligation to help her. Thank you, Gideon, she said softly, for everything. You are welcome, Penelope. The days turned into weeks, and Penelope settled into life at Riverside Ranch. The work was hard but satisfying. She woke before dawn to help Mrs. Hartwell prepare breakfast for the ranch hands, spent her days doing laundry, mending clothes, cleaning the house, and preparing meals. Her hands, which had been soft from her relatively easy life in Alta, became rough and calloused. Her body ached at night from the physical labor, but she slept deeply and dreamlessly, too exhausted for nightmares. Mrs. Hartwell proved to be an excellent teacher and a fair employer. She showed Penelope how to make bread that rose properly in the high altitude, how to preserve vegetables for the winter, how to get stubborn stains out of work clothes. She told stories about building the ranch with Roberto, about the struggles and triumphs of creating something lasting in this harsh land. Penelope found herself thinking about Samuel less as the days passed, not because she loved him any less, but because the sharp pain of loss was gradually being replaced by acceptance. She had loved him, and that love had been real and good, but it belonged to a part of her life that was over now. She had to build something new. She saw Gideon nearly every day. He worked as a horse trainer, breaking and training the young horses that Riverside Ranch bred for sale. Penelope would sometimes watch from the kitchen window as he worked in the corral, patient and gentle with even the most stubborn animals. He never used a whip or cruel methods, instead building trust slowly and carefully. In the evenings after supper, Gideon often found reasons to linger. He would offer to help carry heavy pots, or to fix a loose board on the porch steps, or to walk Penelope to the chicken coop to collect eggs. They would talk about everything and nothing, his childhood in Oklahoma, her education in Alta's small schoolhouse, his love of horses, her secret desire to see the ocean someday. Penelope began to notice things about Gideon that made her heart beat a little faster. The way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the gentle strength in his hands when he helped her carry something heavy, the sound of his laugh, deep and genuine. The way he listened to her, really listened, as if what she said mattered. One evening in late September, as they walked by the stream in the cooling air, Gideon said, "There is a dance in town next Saturday, just a small thing at the community hall. I was wondering if you might like to go. With me." Penelope's heart stuttered. "I am not sure that is a good idea. What if someone from Alta is there?" "We would not be going to Alta. This is in Springville, about 20 miles west. Folks from all the surrounding ranches attend. It is a good time, and Mrs. Hartwell always goes. You would be well chaperoned." He paused, then added quietly, But if you do not want to go, or if you are not ready for something like that, I understand." Penelope realized that she did want to go. More than that, she wanted to go with Gideon. The realization startled her. When had her feelings shifted from gratitude to something deeper? When had she started looking forward to seeing him each day? Started noticing the way her spirits lifted when she heard his voice? "I would like to go," she said. "Thank you for asking." His face lit up with a smile that made her stomach flip. "Really? That is wonderful. I promise you will have a good time." The week leading up to the dance seemed to drag on forever. Penelope found herself thinking about it constantly, wondering what she would wear, whether she would remember how to dance, whether Gideon would be disappointed. Mrs. Hartwell noticed her distraction and took pity on her. "Come with me," the older woman said one afternoon, leading Penelope upstairs to her own bedroom. She opened a large wardrobe and pulled out a dress in a deep blue color, simple but beautifully made. "This was mine when I was younger. Roberto always said it brought out my eyes. It should fit you well enough with a few adjustments." "Mrs. Hartwell, I cannot take your dress," Penelope protested. "Nonsense. It has been sitting in this wardrobe for years, and I will never fit into it again. Better it should be worn and appreciated than left to gather dust." She held it up against Penelope. "Yes, the color suits you. Your eyes are more gray than blue, but the contrast is lovely. We will take it in at the waist and let out the hem a bit, and you will be the prettiest girl at the dance." "I doubt that," Penelope said, but she was smiling. "Gideon will not be able to take his eyes off you," Mrs. Hartwell said with a knowing look. "That boy has been smitten since the day he found you on that road." Penelope felt her cheeks warm. "We are just friends." "If you say so, dear, Mrs." Hartwell's tone made it clear she did not believe that for a second. Saturday arrived with clear skies and a pleasant breeze. Penelope spent extra time getting ready, washing her hair with the lavender soap Mrs. Hartwell provided and carefully pinning it up in a style her mother had taught her years ago. The blue dress fit perfectly after their alterations, and when she looked at herself in the small mirror above her washstand, she hardly recognized the woman looking back. She looked older somehow, more serious, but also more alive than she had felt in months. When she came downstairs, Gideon was waiting in the front hall with Mrs. Hartwell and Jack Sullivan. Gideon was dressed in clean trousers, a pressed white shirt, and a vest. His hair was neatly combed, and he had clearly made an effort to scrub away the dust of ranch work. When he saw Penelope, he stopped mid-sentence and just stared. "You look beautiful," he said, his voice slightly hoarse. "You look very nice too," Penelope managed to say, her heart hammering in her chest. Mrs. Hartwell had arranged for them to travel to the dance in her wagon, with Jack driving and herself providing proper chaperone duties. The ride to Springville took about an hour and a half, and they arrived just as the sun was setting and lanterns were being lit around the community hall. The hall was a simple wooden building, but inside it had been decorated with wildflowers and ribbons. A small group of musicians was setting up in one corner. A fiddler, a man with a guitar, and a woman with an accordion. Tables along one wall held food and drinks that various families had contributed. The room was already half full of ranchers and their families, everyone dressed in their best clothes and clearly ready to enjoy an evening of music and dancing. Several people greeted Mrs. Hartwell warmly, and she introduced Penelope as her new household assistant. People were friendly and welcoming, asking where she was from and how she was settling in. Penelope relaxed slightly, grateful that no one seemed to recognize her or ask too many probing questions. When the music started, Gideon held out his hand. "May I have this dance?" Penelope placed her hand in his, and he led her onto the dance floor. The first dance was a simple waltz, and Penelope was relieved to find that her feet remembered the steps her father had taught her years ago. Gideon was a good dancer, leading confidently but gently, giving her space to follow without feeling pulled around. "You are full of surprises," she said as they moved around the floor. "I would not have guessed that a cowboy from Oklahoma would be such a good dancer." "My mother insisted," Gideon said with a grin. "She said that dancing was important, that it taught you how to move with another person, how to communicate without words. I did not understand what she meant until I was older, but she was right." They danced several more dances, and with each one, Penelope became more aware of Gideon's hand on her waist, the warmth of his palm against hers, the way their bodies moved in harmony. Between dances, they got punch and talked with other attendees. Penelope met several women who worked at neighboring ranches, and she found herself laughing genuinely for the first time in months. As the evening wore on and the music grew livelier, Gideon pulled her outside for a breath of fresh air. They walked a little way from the hall, where the music was muted and the stars were brilliant overhead. "Are you having a good time?" Gideon asked. "I am having a wonderful time," Penelope said honestly. "Thank you for inviting me. I did not realize how much I needed this." "I am glad." Gideon was quiet for a moment, then said, "Penelope, I need to tell you something. I have been trying to find the right time, but I do not think there is a right time for this kind of thing, so I am just going to say it." Penelope's heart started racing. "What is it?" "I have feelings for you, strong feelings. I have had them almost since the day I met you on that road. I know you have been through a lot, and I know you love someone else, and I do not want to pressure you or make things complicated. But I cannot keep pretending that I just want to be friends when the truth is that I think about you constantly. You are smart and brave and kind, and being near you makes me happier than I have been in years." He took a deep breath. "I am not asking you to feel the same way. I just needed you to know." Penelope stared at him, her mind racing. She had suspected that Gideon had feelings for her, had felt the growing attraction between them, but hearing him say it out loud made it real in a way that she had not been prepared for. "Gideon, she started, then stopped, trying to gather her thoughts. "I did love Samuel, part of me always will, but that feels like it happened to a different person, in a different life. These past 2 months at the ranch, getting to know you, I have felt something growing inside me, something I was afraid to acknowledge because it seemed too soon, or disloyal, or dangerous. But the truth is that I have feelings for you too. You make me feel safe and valued and seen in a way I have never experienced before. When I am with you, I feel like I can be myself without fear of judgment." Gideon's face lit up with hope. "Really? You really feel that way?" "I do. But Gideon, I am afraid I was cast out once for loving the wrong man. What if—" "Stop right there," Gideon said firmly, taking both of her hands in his. "There is no wrong man when it comes to love, Penelope. Your father was wrong about Samuel, and if anyone has a problem with you and me, then they are wrong too. I do not care what anyone else thinks. The only thing that matters is what we feel for each other." "Love is never wrong with me," Penelope whispered, testing the words. "Is that what you are saying?" "That is exactly what I am saying. Love is never wrong when it is real and honest and true. What we feel, whatever this is between us, it is not wrong. It could never be wrong." Penelope felt tears spring to her eyes, but they were happy tears this time. "I want to believe that. I want to believe that I get to choose my own path, my own happiness." "You do," Gideon said intensely. "You absolutely do. And if you choose me, I promise I will spend every day proving that you made the right choice." "I do choose you," Penelope said, her voice stronger now. "I choose this. I choose us." Gideon's smile was radiant in the starlight. "Can I kiss you?" "Yes," Penelope breathed. He leaned in slowly, giving her time to change her mind, but she did not want to. When his lips met hers, it was gentle and sweet and perfect. Penelope felt something inside her that had been tight and fearful finally begin to relax. This was right. This was what she had been moving towards since the day Gideon had found her on that dusty road. When they pulled apart, both breathing a little harder, Gideon rested his forehead against hers. "I have wanted to do that for so long." "I am glad you finally did," Penelope said with a soft laugh. They stayed outside a while longer, talking quietly and stealing more kisses before finally returning to the dance. Mrs. Hartwell took one look at their faces and smiled knowingly, but said nothing. The rest of the evening passed in a happy blur, and by the time they loaded back into the wagon for the ride home, Penelope felt like she was floating. Over the following months, Penelope and Gideon's relationship deepened and grew. They were careful to maintain propriety, always mindful of Mrs. Hartwell's watchful eye, and the need to avoid gossip. But they found time to be together. Morning walks before breakfast, evening talks by the stream, stolen moments in the barn or the garden where they could hold hands and talk about their dreams for the future. Gideon told her about his plans to eventually own his own small ranch, where he could breed and train horses. Penelope told him about her love of reading and her secret wish to travel beyond Utah someday. They talked about everything: their fears, their hopes, their past pain, and their growing certainty that they wanted to build a future together. Winter came to Utah with heavy snows and bitter cold. The ranch work changed with the seasons, becoming more focused on caring for the animals and maintaining the buildings against the harsh weather. Penelope learned to cook hearty stews and thick breads that would stick to the ribs of men working in freezing temperatures. She learned to card wool and knit socks and scarves. She felt herself becoming stronger, more capable, more confident in her abilities. On Christmas morning, Mrs. Hartwell gave all her employees small gifts: new gloves for the ranch hands, a beautiful scarf for Penelope, and for Gideon, a fine saddle that had belonged to her late husband. But the best gift came later that evening, when Gideon asked Penelope to walk with him despite the cold. They bundled up in coats and scarves and walked to the barn, where Gideon had clearly prepared something special. He had set up a small area with blankets and lanterns, creating a warm, private space. A thermos of hot coffee sat waiting, along with 2 tin cups. "I wanted to give you your real present in private," Gideon said, looking nervous in a way Penelope had never seen before. "You got me something?" Penelope asked, surprised. They had agreed not to exchange gifts, since neither of them had much money. "I made you something, actually, with some help from Jack." Gideon pulled a small wooden box from his coat pocket and handed it to her. Penelope opened it carefully. Inside was a delicate necklace made of silver wire, worked into the shape of a small horse. It was beautiful, and clearly had taken hours of careful work to create. "Gideon, this is incredible," she breathed. "There is more," he said quietly. "Look closer at the horse." Penelope held the necklace up to the lantern light and saw that on the horse's flank, Gideon had carefully engraved tiny letters, P and G, intertwined. "Penelope, I know we have only known each other for 5 months. I know that some people would say it is too soon. But I have never been more certain of anything in my life." Gideon took her hands, his green eyes intense and sincere. "I love you. I love your strength and your courage and your kind heart. I love the way you laugh at my terrible jokes and the way you are not afraid to tell me when I am wrong about something. I love that you see the good in people even after the world has treated you poorly. I want to spend the rest of my life with you, if you will have me. Penelope Morrison, will you marry me?" Penelope felt tears streaming down her face, but she was smiling so hard her cheeks hurt. "Yes, yes, of course, yes. I love you too, Gideon. I love you so much." Gideon whooped with joy and picked her up, spinning her around in the small space. They were both laughing and crying at the same time, overwhelmed with happiness. When he set her down, he kissed her deeply, and Penelope felt like her heart might burst from how full it was. "I do not have a ring yet," Gideon said apologetically, "but I am saving up for one, a proper one." "I do not need a ring," Penelope said firmly. "This necklace is more precious to me than any ring could be. It is perfect." They stayed in the barn for hours, making plans and dreaming about their future. Gideon wanted to marry as soon as possible, but Penelope convinced him they should wait until spring, when the weather would be better and they could have a proper ceremony with all the ranch folks in attendance. When they finally told Mrs. Hartwell the next morning, the older woman pulled them both into a tight hug. "I am so happy for you both. Roberto and I would have celebrated our 35th anniversary this year if he had lived. Marriage is hard work, but when it is with the right person, it is the best thing in the world. You two have found something special. Treasure it." The winter months passed quickly as Penelope and Gideon prepared for their wedding. Mrs. Hartwell insisted on making Penelope's wedding dress herself, a beautiful creation in cream-colored silk that she had been saving for a special occasion. The ranch hands took up a collection and bought Gideon a new suit. Jack Sullivan agreed to give Penelope away, since her own father had forfeited that right. In early April of 1879, on a warm spring day with wildflowers blooming across the meadows, Penelope Morrison married Gideon Owens in a ceremony held right there at Riverside Ranch. The local minister came out to perform the service, and every ranch hand attended, along with several neighboring ranchers and their families. It was a simple ceremony, but it was full of love and genuine joy. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Gideon kissed Penelope with such enthusiasm that everyone laughed and cheered. Penelope felt like she might float away from happiness. This man, this good and honest man, was now her husband. They belonged to each other, and no one could take that away. Mrs. Hartwell hosted a wonderful reception with food and music and dancing. As Penelope and Gideon danced their first dance as a married couple, Penelope caught Mrs. Hartwell's eye. The older woman was crying happy tears, and she raised her glass in a silent toast. Penelope understood the message. This is what love looks like when it is allowed to flourish. This is what happens when you are brave enough to choose your own path. That night, Gideon carried Penelope over the threshold of the small cabin that Mrs. Hartwell had given them as a wedding present. It was on the edge of the ranch property, just 2 rooms, but cozy and private. Gideon had spent the past month fixing it up, repairing the roof, building new furniture, making it a real home for them. "Welcome home, Mrs. Owens," Gideon said, setting her down gently. "Mrs. Owens," Penelope repeated, testing out her new name. "I like the sound of that." Their wedding night was tender and sweet, both of them nervous but eager to finally be alone together without having to worry about propriety or chaperones. Gideon was gentle and patient, making sure Penelope felt safe and cherished. When they finally came together as husband and wife, Penelope felt a completeness she had never imagined possible. This was what love was meant to be: equal parts passion and tenderness, desire and respect, physical union and emotional connection. Afterward, they lay tangled together in their marriage bed, talking quietly in the darkness. "Are you happy?" Gideon asked, running his fingers through her loose hair. "I am happier than I have ever been," Penelope said honestly. "Sometimes I think about that day you found me on the road, and I wonder what would have happened if you had ridden past without stopping. Where would I be now?" "I could not have ridden past," Gideon said, "even if I had wanted to, which I did not. Something inside me knew that I needed to stop. It was like fate, or providence, or whatever you want to call it. We were meant to find each other." "Love is never wrong with you?" Penelope said softly. "You told me that the night of the dance. You were right. This love, what we have, it is the most right thing I have ever felt." "It is the most right thing I have ever felt too," Gideon agreed. "And I promise you, Penelope, I will spend every day of our lives making sure you never regret choosing me." "I could never regret this," Penelope said, kissing him. "Never." The years that followed were not always easy, but they were good. Gideon continued working at Riverside Ranch while saving money toward his dream of owning his own land. Penelope kept working for Mrs. Hartwell, though now she came back to her own cabin each night instead of sleeping at the main house. The transition from being alone to being married took some adjustment for both of them, learning each other's habits and quirks, figuring out how to share space and make decisions together. But they worked through it with patience and humor and an abundance of love. In the fall of 1879, Penelope discovered she was pregnant. She was terrified at first, remembering stories of women who died in childbirth. But Gideon was thrilled and supportive, and Mrs. Hartwell assured her that she would help her through it. Their son was born in May of 1880, a healthy baby boy with Gideon's green eyes and Penelope's auburn hair. They named him Thomas Roberto Owens, the middle name in honor of Mrs. Hartwell's late husband, who had made their life at the ranch possible. Penelope had never known she could love someone as much as she loved that tiny baby, and watching Gideon hold their son with such tenderness and wonder made her fall in love with her husband all over again. Mrs. Hartwell became little Tommy's honorary grandmother, spoiling him terribly and insisting on watching him whenever Penelope needed a break. The ranch hands took turns carving him toys and teaching him to recognize different animals. Tommy grew up surrounded by love and acceptance, never knowing the prejudice and hatred that had marked his mother's earlier life. In 1882, Mrs. Hartwell made Gideon and Penelope an offer that changed everything. Her arthritis had gotten worse, and she was ready to start stepping back from the day-to-day management of the ranch. She proposed that Gideon take over as ranch manager with a significantly higher salary and a share of the profits. It would mean they could save money faster and eventually buy land of their own. Gideon was honored but hesitant. "I do not know if I am ready for that kind of responsibility," he told Penelope. "You are more than ready," Penelope said firmly. "You are the hardest worker on this ranch, and everyone respects you. Mrs. Hartwell would not have offered if she did not think you could do it." "What do you think?" Gideon asked. "This is your life too." "I think we should accept," Penelope said. "I think this is the opportunity we have been working toward, and even if it is scary, we will figure it out together, the way we always do." So Gideon became the ranch manager, and he was brilliant at it. He had a natural gift for organization and for getting the best out of people without being harsh or unfair. Under his management, Riverside Ranch became even more successful, and his reputation as a fair and skilled manager spread throughout the territory. In 1883, their daughter was born, a beautiful little girl they named Sarah Eleanor Owens, with her mother's gray eyes and her father's dark hair. Tommy, now 3 years old, was fascinated by his baby sister and insisted on helping with everything, from fetching diapers to singing her lullabies. Watching her children grow up happy and loved, Penelope sometimes thought about her own family in Alta and wondered if they ever thought about her, if they ever regretted what they had done. But the pain of that loss had faded over the years, replaced by the joy of the family she had built with Gideon. In 1885, Mrs. Hartwell's health took a turn for the worse. She had been slowing down for a while, but now it was clear that she did not have much time left. Penelope spent hours sitting with her, reading to her, reminiscing about the years they had spent together. Mrs. Hartwell had become like a mother to her, filling the void that her own mother had left. "You have been such a gift to me," Mrs. Hartwell said one afternoon, her voice weak but clear. "You and Gideon both. You made this old ranch feel like a home again after Roberto died. You gave me a reason to keep going." "You saved my life," Penelope said, tears streaming down her face. "I do not know what would have happened to me if you had not taken me in." "You would have survived," Mrs. Hartwell said with certainty. "You are one of the strongest people I have ever met. But I am glad I could help. I am glad I got to be part of your story, and that you became part of mine." Mrs. Hartwell passed away peacefully in her sleep a week later, surrounded by the people who loved her. At her funeral, nearly 100 people came to pay their respects, a testament to the life she had lived and the people she had touched. In her will, she left Riverside Ranch to Gideon and Penelope, along with all the livestock and equipment. It was an incredible gift, one that left them both stunned and humbled. "She believed in us from the beginning," Gideon said, as they stood looking out over the property that was now theirs. "She gave us a chance when no one else would. We have to make sure her legacy lives on." "We will," Penelope promised. "We will run this ranch with the same values she taught us: fairness, respect, and giving people chances. We will make her proud." And they did. Over the following years, Gideon and Penelope built on the foundation Mrs. Hartwell had laid, expanding the ranch and its reputation for quality livestock and ethical treatment of both animals and employees. They became known throughout Utah as people of integrity and compassion, willing to give work to anyone willing to work hard, regardless of their background. They had 2 more children, a son named Daniel in 1886 and another daughter named Margaret in 1889. Their home was always full of noise and laughter and love. Penelope taught all her children to read and write, instilling in them a love of learning and a curiosity about the world. Gideon taught them to ride and rope and care for animals with patience and kindness. As the children grew, Penelope told them the story of how she and their father had met, how she had been cast out by her own family for following her heart, and how Gideon had shown her that love is never wrong when it is true and honest. She wanted them to understand that the world could be harsh and unfair, but that it was also full of good people who would help if you let them. In 1895, when Penelope was 38 years old, something unexpected happened. She received a letter. It had been forwarded through several addresses before finally reaching Riverside Ranch, and the handwriting on the envelope made her hands shake. It was her mother's handwriting. With trembling fingers, Penelope opened the letter and read, "My dearest Penelope, I do not know if this letter will reach you or if you will even want to read it if it does. I do not deserve your forgiveness, but I am writing to ask for it anyway. Your father passed away 6 months ago, and his death has made me face truths I have been avoiding for 17 years. We were wrong, Penelope. I was wrong. Wrong to let him cast you out. Wrong to stay silent. Wrong to choose prejudice over my own daughter. I have lived with that regret every single day since you left. I heard from a traveling merchant that you are living on a ranch near Springville, that you are married with children, that you are happy. I am so glad you found happiness, even though it was no thanks to me. I am not asking you to come back or to forgive me. I just wanted you to know that I am sorry, that I love you, and that I have always been proud of you for having the courage I lacked. Your mother, Helen Morrison." Penelope read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face. Gideon found her like that, sitting at their kitchen table with the letter clutched in her hands. "What is it?" he asked, immediately concerned. She handed him the letter and watched his face as he read. When he finished, he looked at her with such understanding and compassion that she started crying harder. "What do you want to do?" he asked gently. "I do not know," Penelope admitted. "Part of me wants to crumple this letter up and throw it away. Part of me wants to write back. Part of me wants to go to Alta and see her face to face. I do not know what I am supposed to feel." "You are supposed to feel however you actually feel," Gideon said, pulling her into his arms. "There is no right or wrong answer here. She is your mother, and what happened between you is complicated. You do not have to decide right now. Think about it. Pray about it if that helps. Whatever you decide, I will support you." Penelope thought about it for several days, turning the question over and over in her mind. Finally, she made her decision. She wrote back to her mother, a carefully worded letter that acknowledged the pain of the past, but left the door open for the possibility of reconciliation. She told her mother about her life, about Gideon and their children, about the ranch and the community they had built. She did not say she forgave her because she was not sure she was ready for that yet, but she said she was willing to correspond, to take small steps toward healing the breach between them. Her mother wrote back almost immediately, and over the following months, they exchanged several letters. Penelope learned that her father had become bitter and angry in his final years, that her brothers had both moved away and rarely visited, that her mother had been essentially alone. She felt a complicated mix of pity and residual anger, but mostly she felt sad for all the wasted years. In the spring of 1896, Penelope invited her mother to visit Riverside Ranch. She was nervous about it, worried about how Gideon and the children would react, worried about what feelings seeing her mother again would bring up. But when the wagon arrived and her mother stepped down, looking so much older and more frail than Penelope remembered, she felt something inside her soften. "Hello, Mother," she said. "Hello, Penelope," her mother said, and then she started crying. "I am so sorry. I am so sorry." Penelope found herself stepping forward and hugging her mother, something she had not done in 17 years. "I know," she said. "I know you are." The visit was awkward at times, full of difficult conversations and painful memories being aired out. But it was also healing in ways Penelope had not expected. Her mother met Gideon and was visibly impressed by his character and the respect he showed Penelope. She met her grandchildren and wept over how beautiful they were, how kind and smart and full of life. She saw the home Penelope had built, the life she had created, and she acknowledged that it was far better than anything she would have had if she had stayed in Alta and married the respectable white man her father had chosen for her. "You were braver than I ever was," her mother said on her last evening at the ranch. "You chose love over fear, and you built something real and lasting. I am so proud of you, Penelope. I hope you can believe that." "I am starting to," Penelope said honestly. "It will take time, Mother. The hurt does not just go away because we want it to. But I am willing to try if you are." "I am," her mother said. "For whatever time I have left, I want to try." Her mother visited several more times over the following years, and gradually, Penelope found that she was able to forgive, not forget, never forget, but forgive. She realized that holding on to the anger and pain was only hurting herself, and she wanted to be free of it. She wanted to focus on the good in her life, her husband who loved her unconditionally, her children who were growing into remarkable people, the home they had built together. In 1899, Penelope's mother passed away peacefully in her sleep during one of her visits to the ranch. Penelope grieved, but it was a clean grief, uncomplicated by regret or unfinished business. She had been able to say goodbye, to tell her mother she loved her, to make peace with the past. She buried her mother in the small cemetery on ranch property next to Mrs. Hartwell and Roberto, two other people who had been family in all the ways that mattered. The new century brought changes. The Wild West was becoming less wild, with more law and order, more settlements, more civilization creeping in. But Riverside Ranch remained a constant, a place where hard work was valued and people were judged by their character rather than their circumstances. Tommy, now 20 years old, had developed his father's gift with horses and was managing the breeding program. Sarah, at 16, had her mother's sharp mind and was keeping the ranch's books with impressive accuracy. Daniel, at 13, was already showing signs of being a natural leader, able to mediate disputes among the ranch hands with wisdom beyond his years. and little Margaret, now 10, had announced her intention to become a teacher, inspired by her mother's love of learning. Gideon and Penelope, now in their early 40s, would often sit on the porch of their cabin in the evenings, watching the sun set over the mountains and reflecting on the life they had built. "Do you ever regret it?" Gideon asked one evening. "Leaving Alta, giving up your family, everything you went through?" Penelope considered the question seriously, as she always did. "I regret the pain. I regret that Samuel got hurt because of me. I regret the lost years with my mother, but do I regret the choices that led me here? No, never. Every hardship, every difficult moment, they all led me to you. They led me to this life, this family, this home. How could I regret that?" "I love you," Gideon said, taking her hand. "After 20 years, I love you more than I did on our wedding day. I did not think that was possible, but it is." "I love you too," Penelope said, leaning her head on his shoulder. "You told me once that love is never wrong with you. You were right. This love has been the most right thing in my life. You have been the most right thing in my life." They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the stars come out one by one. In the distance, they could hear their children's laughter as they played some game in the yard. The cattle were settled for the night, and the horses nickered softly in the barn. Everything was as it should be. Penelope thought about that desperate young woman who had walked down a dusty road with nothing but a small bundle and a broken heart. She thought about the cowboy who had stopped to offer her water and kindness when the world had shown her nothing but cruelty. She thought about all the days and years between then and now, all the love and laughter, and even the tears that had woven together to create this beautiful tapestry of a life. She had been cast out for loving the wrong man, told that her heart was wrong, that her choices were shameful. But she had found someone who showed her a different truth, that love in its purest form is never wrong, that choosing to follow your heart takes more courage than following the expectations of others, and that sometimes being cast out is actually being set free. In the years that followed, as Penelope and Gideon grew older together, they watched their children marry and have children of their own. Tommy married a school teacher from Salt Lake City, a smart woman named Catherine who fit into the ranch family perfectly. Sarah fell in love with a veterinarian who had come to treat their horses, and they built a house on the far edge of the ranch property. Daniel eventually took over the day-to-day management of the ranch, showing the same fairness and integrity his parents had taught him. And Margaret did become a teacher, opening a small school right there on the ranch for the children of their employees and neighboring families. Riverside Ranch continued to thrive under the Owens family management, becoming known not just for quality livestock, but for being a place where people of all backgrounds could find honest work and fair treatment. They employed men and women from all walks of life, former soldiers, freed slaves heading west, immigrants from Europe and Asia, young people looking for a fresh start. Gideon and Penelope remembered what it was like to need a chance, and they made sure to give chances to others. In 1908, on their 29th wedding anniversary, Gideon planned a surprise for Penelope. He had been secretly planning it for months, working with their children to arrange everything. On the morning of their anniversary, he woke her early and told her to pack a bag for a week away. "Where are we going?" Penelope asked, confused but excited. "You will see," Gideon said with a mysterious smile. They took the train west, all the way to California, and then a carriage to the coast. When Penelope saw the ocean for the first time, stretching out impossibly vast and blue to the horizon, she burst into tears. "You remembered," she said, turning to Gideon with wonder in her eyes. "You told me on the night of our first dance that you secretly wanted to see the ocean someday," Gideon said, wrapping his arms around her. "I have been saving up to make it happen. We have a whole week here, just the two of us. The kids are managing the ranch. For 1 week, we can just be Gideon and Penelope, not ranch owners or parents or employers, just us." That week by the ocean was magical. They walked along the beach, collected shells, watched the sunset over the water, and talked about everything and nothing. They felt young again, like the couple who had fallen in love 29 years ago, but with the depth and understanding that only comes from building a life together through good times and bad. On their last night there, as they sat on the beach watching the waves roll in under a star-filled sky, Penelope said, "Thank you for this. Thank you for remembering that silly dream I mentioned all those years ago." "It was not silly," Gideon said. "Your dreams have never been silly. I made a promise when I married you that I would spend my life making sure you never regretted choosing me. This is part of that promise." "I have never regretted it," Penelope said firmly. "Not for a single moment. You have given me more happiness than I ever imagined possible. You showed me what real love looks like, patient and kind and steadfast. You showed me that being cast out was actually a blessing, because it led me to you. Love is never wrong with me." Gideon repeated the words he had said to her so long ago. "It is still true, you know. Every day I wake up loving you, and every day that love feels as right as breathing." "Love is never wrong with you," Penelope agreed, kissing him as the waves crashed behind them. "It never has been, and it never will be." They returned to the ranch refreshed and renewed, ready to continue the work they loved and the life they had built. The years continued to pass, bringing their share of challenges, droughts that tested the ranch's resources, economic downturns that required careful management, the occasional conflict among employees that needed mediation. But through it all, Gideon and Penelope faced everything together, their partnership stronger than ever. In 1915, when Penelope was 58 years old and Gideon was 60, they decided it was time to officially retire from the day-to-day operations of the ranch. Daniel had been managing most things for years anyway, and he was more than ready to take over completely. They would still live on the ranch, still be available for advice and help, but the primary responsibility would pass to the next generation. On the day they officially handed over the management, they gathered the entire family, their 4 children, now all adults with children of their own, the ranch hands who had become like family over the decades, and friends from neighboring ranches. They held a celebration with food and music and dancing, much like the reception after their wedding all those years ago. Daniel stood up to make a toast. "I want to thank my parents for everything they have built here. This ranch is more than just a business. It is a place where people are valued, where hard work and honesty are rewarded, where everyone gets a fair chance regardless of where they came from or what they look like. My parents taught me that love and respect are not weaknesses, they are strengths. They showed me that standing up for what is right, even when it is difficult, is always worth it. I promise that, as I take over the management of Riverside Ranch, I will honor the values they have instilled in this place. I will make sure that their legacy continues for generations to come." Everyone cheered and raised their glasses, and Penelope felt tears of pride streaming down her face. This was more than she could have ever dreamed of. A family built on love and acceptance, a business built on integrity, a legacy that would outlast her own life. That night, as she and Gideon walked back to their cabin hand in hand, Penelope said, "We did it. We really did it. We built something good and lasting." "We did," Gideon agreed. And it all started with a young woman walking down a dusty road and a cowboy who could not ride past without stopping to help. "No," Penelope corrected gently. "It started with you seeing me as a person worthy of help, worthy of kindness, worthy of love. It started with you showing me that my family was wrong, that love is never wrong when it is true and honest. You saved me, Gideon, not just that day on the road, but every day since." "We saved each other," Gideon said. "I was drifting before I met you, going through the motions, but not really living. You gave me purpose and joy, and a reason to be the best version of myself. You taught me that real courage is not about being fearless. It is about choosing love even when you are afraid. You are the bravest person I know." Penelope Owens. They spent their retirement years enjoying their grandchildren, traveling to places they had always wanted to see, and simply enjoying each other's company. They took trips to San Francisco, to Denver, back to the ocean several more times. They read books together in the evenings, took long walks around the ranch, and spent hours sitting on their porch watching the world go by. Their grandchildren adored them, often begging to hear stories about the old days, about how their grandparents had met, about building the ranch, about the adventures they had had. Penelope loved telling these stories, loved seeing the wonder in her grandchildren's eyes as they learned about their family history. In 1925, on their 46th wedding anniversary, they renewed their vows in a simple ceremony surrounded by their family. They were both in their late 60s now, their hair silver, their faces lined with age, but the love between them was as strong as ever. When they recited their vows, promising to love and cherish each other for whatever time they had left, there was not a dry eye in the room. "I would choose you 1,000 times over," Penelope said, her voice wavering with emotion. In every lifetime, in every circumstance, I would always choose you. And I would always stop on that road, Gideon said, his green eyes still as bright as the day she met him. I would always offer you water, always help you, always fall in love with you. It was inevitable from the moment I saw you. You were mine, and I was yours, and that is how it was always meant to be. They lived another decade together, their love deepening even as their bodies grew frailer. They faced the challenges of aging with grace and humor, taking care of each other through various ailments and setbacks. When Gideon developed a persistent cough that turned into pneumonia in the winter of 1935, Penelope nursed him tirelessly, refusing to leave his side. "You cannot leave me yet," she told him fiercely, holding his hand as he lay in their bed. "We still have so much to do, so much to see." "We have had 56 years," Gideon said weakly, his breathing labored. 56 incredible years. That is more than most people get, Penelope. We have been blessed. "I know, but I am not ready to say goodbye," Penelope said, tears streaming down her face. "You are the strongest person I know," Gideon said, squeezing her hand with what little strength he had left. "You survived being cast out by your family. You built a whole new life from nothing. You will survive this too, and you will keep living. Keep loving our children and grandchildren. Keep making sure our legacy continues. Promise me." "I promise," Penelope whispered, "but you have to promise me something too. Promise me that you know how much I have loved you. Promise me you know that you were the best thing that ever happened to me." "I know," Gideon said, managing a small smile. "How could I not know when you showed me every single day? I love you, Penelope Owens. I have loved you from the moment I saw you on that road, and I will love you beyond this life into whatever comes next." He passed away peacefully that night, with Penelope holding his hand and their children gathered around. Penelope felt like part of her own soul had been ripped away, but she kept her promise. She grieved deeply but continued living, finding purpose in her family and in maintaining the legacy she and Gideon had built together. She lived another 7 years, spending that time writing down the story of her life with Gideon, so that future generations would know where they came from. She wrote about being cast out by her family, about meeting Gideon on that dusty road, about building Riverside Ranch into what it had become. She wrote about the power of choosing love over fear, of standing up against prejudice, of giving people chances and treating everyone with dignity. "The love is never wrong," she wrote in the final pages of her memoir. "That is what Gideon taught me, and that is what I hope to pass on to everyone who reads this. When you love someone truly and honestly, when you build your life on respect and partnership and genuine care for each other's well-being, that love can never be wrong. Do not let fear or prejudice or other people's narrow-mindedness stop you from following your heart. Be brave enough to choose love, even when it is difficult, even when the world tells you that you are wrong. In the end, love is all that matters. Love is what lasts." Penelope passed away in her sleep in 1942, at the age of 85, surrounded by her children and grandchildren and even some great-grandchildren. She was buried next to Gideon on the hill overlooking Riverside Ranch, their graves marked with simple stones that bore their names, and a single inscription, "Love is never wrong." The ranch continued to thrive under the management of their descendants, who carried on the values Penelope and Gideon had established. The story of how they met, of how Gideon had found Penelope on that dusty road and offered her not just water, but hope and a new beginning, became family legend. It was told and retold to each new generation, a reminder that sometimes the worst moments of our lives can lead to the best things, that kindness offered to a stranger can change the course of history, and that love, when it is real and true, can overcome any obstacle. The little cabin where they had started their married life was preserved as a historic site on the ranch, and visitors could see the simple rooms where Penelope and Gideon had built their life together. The necklace Gideon had made for her, with the tiny silver horse bearing their intertwined initials, was passed down through the family, eventually ending up in a display case in the ranch's small museum alongside Penelope's memoir and photographs of the couple throughout their long life together. Their story became more than just a family history. It became a testament to the power of choosing love over prejudice, of standing up for what is right even when it costs everything, of building a life based on mutual respect and genuine partnership. It became a reminder that the opinions of others matter less than the truth of your own heart, and that sometimes the people who cast you out are actually freeing you to find where you truly belong. In the end, Penelope Morrison, who had been cast out by her family for loving the wrong man, had found the right man after all, a cowboy who looked at her with kindness when the world had shown her cruelty, who offered her water when she was dying of thirst, who showed her that love is never wrong when it is built on honesty, respect, and genuine care. Together, they had built a legacy that lasted long after they were gone, proving that real love, the kind that changes lives and builds futures, is always worth fighting for. Their story proved that sometimes being cast out is actually a blessing in disguise, that losing everything can be the first step toward finding what truly matters, and that the most wrong thing you can do is deny your own heart in favor of other people's prejudices. Penelope and Gideon Owens lived their truth, loved each other fully, and built something beautiful out of circumstances that should have broken them. And that, in the end, was the greatest triumph of all.